Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of the Ordinary Sacred. Don't you know? Don't you know? Oh my goodness. As the weather gets colder, I must have a part from the northern part of the US. Um, Sorry, I must be in a silly mood. Okay, so today we've had a lot of rain here in California, and it's the first sunny day in a while. Brian and I are at a park, and it's beautiful. So I'm excited to be with you. You might have seen already that the title of this video is Am I an Anarchist? And so this video is actually going to be about the first five chapters of this book called The Gift by Lewis Hyde. I believe it was first published in 1979. The way I got this book was many of you know that I've been exploring gift economy for a while, and I made a video about it, and all of my self-paced courses and workshops and meditations and worksheets are free gifts on my website. And if you give a gift donation to me, it goes toward that, toward the overhead for that. But so I entered the gift economy, gosh, it was maybe about a year or so ago. And someone suggested it. They suggested a book by Charles Eisenstein. I read that. I made a video about it. I gained some insight from a dear viewer and friend named Tessa. Tessa, if you're watching, hi. And so I just briefly was talking about it when we were visiting one of Brian's friends in Colorado. And he said, "Ooh, I have a book for you." And I believe the story was that he was in London or Britain somewhere, and a man on the street gave him this book and said, "This is a gift for you." And and then he read it and he said it was transformative for him and I would appreciate it. And I am. I've read through chapter 5 so far, and I stopped there because for now, because at the end of chapter 5, I was in the place where I said, "Am I an anarchist?" Which felt crazy because, of course, I grew up with the idea that communists and anarchists are evil and violent, right? So anyway, um, we will answer that question. Stay tuned to the end of the video to find out if I am an anarchist. Um, so what I'm going to do actually is I made a PowerPoint, a handy dandy PowerPoint, because it helps me stay more focused. And I'm just going to go over the first five chapters because I found them really fascinating. And all of this actually are just quotes that I took from the book, essentially, main points or quotes. And so you'll get an idea really for what the gift economy is, and um, and you can decide for yourself what you think about it. You don't have to agree with me at all. So I'm calling this Am I an Anarchist? The review of chapters 1 through 5 of The Gift by Lewis Hyde. Okay, so chapter 1 is the features of the gift economy. It's kind of like, I like this because it's like an observation of what makes the gift economy effective or work, right? And so the first one, actually, I need to keep my glasses on so I can see. Um, the first one is that the gift must always move. Oh, and I want to just say before I go through these things that these are just highlights. If you want to read the book, I do recommend it. It's fascinating to me. He goes through all kinds of what's the word? He gives examples, he gives stories from history, he gives folk tales, he gives just all kinds of cultural examples of gift economy, and it's really, really interesting. But so some of the premises of the gift economy, the first one is that the gift must always move. And just to speak for it, I have a part that's frustrated right now because I usually like to not have all the text available at first because it can be really distracting for people because you're reading all of it. Um, but that's how I work anyway. But I'm telling that part, it's okay. It'll be okay because we don't want to restart the video and change it. Okay, it'll be okay. Um, so the gift must always move is uh is a fascinating thing because this is kind of in opposition to um, hoarding or saving a lot, right, for a rainy day for ourselves. The gift is always moving, and we'll see how it moves and where it moves and why it moves. So the gift is often property that perishes. Gifts are often food, could be clothing, could be, sometimes it's not a gift that perishes, but it still moves, like a piece of jewelry or artwork or um, music or something, like that. So, but especially when it perishes, right? If you have, say, a fruit tree, you have a bunch of oranges, and oh, your family is fed by the oranges. You might, you know, make orange marmalade and preserve it, or orange juice, or different things like that. But whatever is left over, it wouldn't make sense to keep it and hoard it and let it rot because it doesn't save. So you're going to pass it on to other people. And this shows how the gift economy is very communal. It's very much about I take what I need and then I give from overflow to those around me. So the third one is the gift moves in a circle. Now, if you have two people, it can seem kind of transactional if you're just giving back and forth between the two people, but it actually becomes even more, what's the word? I would say exciting or um, inspirational, fruitful. I don't know what the word is. But when you add another person, at least a third person, and he talks about this in the book, that in ancient cultures, sometimes that was the priest or something, right? But then they realized, well, we don't necessarily need an intermediary, but we one person gives to another, and that person doesn't necessarily give back to me. They pass it on, they move it to someone else, right? And then that person gives, and we'll learn the mechanisms of why they give and why they're motivated to give, but then they give to another person. And within this community, the gifts just keep on moving so that everyone is sustained essentially. And so it's kind of like a cycle. It's not necessarily like a transaction of I give to you, you give something back to me. It's I give to you, and then when you feel that gratitude, you give to someone else because you're motivated to do that. And you give where there's need, essentially. So I loved this statement. You cannot have your cake unless you eat it. So recently, Brian and I, for the first time, really understood what that phrase, you can't have your cake and eat it too, meant. It means that once you've eaten it, then it's gone. So you can't have it, like save it, hold it, and eat it, because then it's gone. But in gift economy, you can't have your cake unless you eat it because you don't really have it if you're just hoarding it and putting it away in a storehouse, right? To have it, you have to be able to consume it or give it to someone else to consume, right? So, and then this point about scarcity was really helpful to me. Scarcity appears when wealth cannot flow. So again, when the gift is not on the move, when there's not a cycle of giving, and when the perishable things are not consumed, then um, then scarcity occurs. The market industrial system actually institutes scarcity because it creates a block for the flow of the natural flow of abundance. So in the book, he says, there's plenty of oxygen on the earth for people to breathe. But if someone creates some kind of funneling system and blocks the oxygen from coming to you, you very understandably feel a scarcity of oxygen and start freaking out, right? He gives an example of a famine happening and there being plenty of rice to feed all of the people. But if they have to have the monetary exchange for the rice and they don't have it, that's going to block them from getting the rice and they are going to starve. They literally have scarcity, even though the reality is not scarcity. The exchange of commodity creates the block of abundance, and then there's scarcity. So, and yeah, the gift always moves. And where does it move? It moves to the empty space. It moves to the need, right? So if I have need, I receive. And so there's an understanding in the gift economy that we are all both givers and receivers. So it's not just about giving, giving, giving all the time. It's I'm giving and I'm receiving. So there has to be there can be parts that block us from either one for various reasons. But where do we give? We give to the empty space. So commodity moves to turn a profit, right? That's kind of the how commodity moves. But gift moves toward the empty space. And this reminds me of back in the day when I was in church and there was the whole tithing and everything. And I did one thing I'm grateful for about that practice was just the seeing that I could give 10% of my income and still be fine, right? And allow, and I think if I was happy to support whatever I was giving to, it was actually a very fruitful practice. So eventually, what I did is I still took the tithe and I gave it to whatever need that month came into my awareness. So it became, someone would post a GoFundMe because they were on hard times, or someone's car broke down, or someone's air conditioning broke down and they didn't have money for it. Someone was asking for money to help uh, feed their community in India, and so I would send the money to wherever the need made itself known around me. And it was such an incredibly fulfilling practice because the fact that I was able to give meant that I had overflow, right? And so it was a reminder to me of essentially the riches that I had and that I was taken care of. Um, so okay, so let's keep going. The gift is based on the interdependence of all living beings. I love this example in the book where there's a tribe that they essentially believe that the salmon that come up, I believe they're in the Pacific Northwest or in Alaska maybe, the salmon that come up in the river, that they're actually these human people that live under the lake, and then they sacrifice themselves and they become salmon in order to feed the people on the land. And so the first salmon that comes up, they do this ritual where they honor it as if it's like the king of the salmon. And they're so grateful. And then they always return the bones to to the river because they believe that the bones then become the salmon men can like gain new life again. And that it's this cycle. Again, this is a just the way that they're thinking about it. But it also reminds me of hunters and gatherers who would get, the berries from the forest, but then they would return the seeds to the forest. Of course, then that would help the abundance of birds, and then they would have birds to eat, right? And it's like this cycle, this beautiful ecology of the interdependence of all living beings. Okay, let's keep moving on. And I'm going to try to not say too much, otherwise the video will be too long, but just so you get the gist of it. Chapter 2 is about gifts in nature and in culture. So when we establish a gift relationship with nature, we tend to respond to nature as a part of ourselves and not as a stranger for exploitation. Um, this is so true. When we think of uh, one of the points that Lewis makes in the book is that in a gift economy, it creates such connection between people because we are kind of interdependent on each other. It creates connection with nature. We see really clearly how we all are connected and we're all part of each other because, like Thich Nhat Hanh says, the book where I'm reading Thich Nhat Hanh's words, the rain and the sun and the soil provided the environment for the tree that then became the paper, right? And then these other elements become the ink. And he receives the gift of the teaching that he is putting onto the paper, and it's all a gift. Everything is a gift. It reminds me of the ordinary sacred, right? Everything is sacred, everything is a gift. And when we begin to see that, this natural flow occurs. And we're less likely to feel separated and disconnected to the point where we feel okay exploiting nature or other people. So in tribal cultures, I'm going to the second one, status and generosity were always associated. Um, in market culture, however, status is associated with what you gain rather than what you give. So, the rich and famous people are the people who have gained a lot of wealth, whereas in tribal cultures, it was those who were generous that had status. It reminds me of the noblige oblique. Is that what it is? Oblique, noblige, the obligation of, but we'll learn here that in gift economy, it's not about obligation at all. But back in the day, some of the most wealthy people would, create museums or build a highway or, give back to the community in some kind of way. Number three is nourishment flows both ways. When we have fed the gift with our labor and generosity, it grows and it feeds us in return. This can, in some ways, especially for those of us who live in a market commodity culture, be a point of faith, an experiment. It has been an experiment for me, right? To say, if I do put the gifts out there without expectation of receiving, will my needs be met? One of the things that it's done for me as I've made things free or very low cost is that I'm aware of how my needs are already met. And some would say, well, it's because Brian was in a market economy that he, is able to retire and has the means to do that. But we're also able to retire because we're living so incredibly simply, right? We're not living beyond our means, hoarding, getting, again, I don't want to come across as judgmental of any choice that anyone is making because I don't know that there are people who have incredible wealth who are incredible givers. I mean, there is motion, there is movement in the wealth that they have, and I think that's really what the gift economy is about. But I was going to say that I honestly feel so secure and content, especially having seen those of you who have given gifts uh, to the right. Wait, no, that way. The bottom right of the video, there's a heart with a dollar sign and or ellipses, and then you can find that. And people have given gifts to, I'm over halfway to the amount that it costs for my overhead to make these videos and to do have the website. So as I see that, it's confirmation to me, even if I were to somehow fall in hard times and not have basic needs like food and shelter, that there would be people who would have enough investment in helping me, and partly because of the investment that I've made, and that there is this real cycle of I'm trying to think of the word. I guess investment in each other, interdependence, commitment. We'll see how the gift creates emotional bonds between people. Okay. Yeah, gifts do not turn profit, they give increase. So it's not like I'm selling something and then getting profit. I'm giving something and then there's an increase in abundance, not just materially, but also relationally, emotionally, spiritually. That happens. There's an increase in the gift giving. And he gives lots of examples of that if you don't know what that means. Um, and then only when the increase of a gift moves with the gift may the accumulated wealth of our spirit continue to grow among us. Um, and I guess I liked that quote. I'm trying to remember the context of it now, but I'm going to keep going. Okay. Oh, I like this chapter. Chapter 3 is called The Labor of Gratitude. And I like this first statement. Between the time a gift comes to us and the time we pass it along, we suffer gratitude, is the way he puts it, which I thought was so interesting because it's almost like this energy source within us, right? And it's very clearly not the force of obligation. It's not like I love that Julie, if you're watching, hi. Um, she's the one who first brought to my attention the difference between compelled and impelled, right? So when we're compelled to do something, it's like someone's pushing us, right? It's an obligation. We have to do this. We should do this. We ought to do this. That when we're impelled, it comes from this internal motivation that feels very natural and organic and life-giving and um, that internal motivation. So that's what gratitude is. So I think it's funny that he says we suffer it, but it's really because we have this impulse, this impelling inside of us to move the gift along until we do. And the gratitude is really what we're feeling there. And he points out that teaching, like what I do, can be a gift, and that the teachings are in passage in the body of their recipient between the time they are received and the time when they have sunk in so deeply that they may be passed along. This process can take years, right? So sometimes I'm offering these self-paced courses and someone who's kind of fertile for it, right? They're ripe to receive the gift of the teaching of IFS, of nonviolent communication, of self-compassion, of listening to your body compass, and all of these things. If their soil is ripe and they receive it, it still can take time for that to germinate and flourish. And at a certain time, when it does grow up and fruit, then they can pass it along to people in their life in whatever way makes sense for them. But in that passing along of the teaching, the gift is moving, it's cycling to others who are ready to receive it. Okay, the third one here says the labor of gratitude is a middle term in the passage of a gift. It is wholly different from obligation that we feel when we accept something we don't want. A gift that has the power to change us awakens a part of our soul. So again, I think he's really talking about this feeling of being impelled, being inspired, right? We really want to give from overflow. It's not a shoulding, it's not a shaming, it's not an obligation. That's definitely not the right word. Um, so sometimes we will get a gift from someone, a gift that is unwanted, or maybe there's a string attached, or there's an obligation or a pressure or something like that. And that will not elicit in us this spark of gratitude. Instead, we'll feel obliged. And so, again, it's important to take note of what happens inside of us when we are given a gift. Some of our culture, around gift giving as Christmas and the holidays come, is one of obligation. I think it started as a beautiful way of connecting people, and it can still be that. But when it's done out of obligation, it's life sucking. It's not life giving. So I know that Brian and I have really tried to figure out a balance of that. We want our loved ones to know that we value them, but we also don't want to give out of obligation or expect. The gift is never expected either. It's never demanded. It's always of free will, always flowing naturally. Um, so it was my sister's birthday recently, and I had gotten her a few little gifts, and I thought, I want to give it to her not on her birthday, even though it's just a few days before, because I want it to be clear that I value you not just because it's this day of the year and I have to give you something, but I value you every day of the year, you know. Um, okay. And then the last point in this chapter, which I really also appreciated, is, we talk about the gifts that we have of creativity and art, right? And we have it, that person has a gift in music or in painting or writing or whatever. And when we talk about the gift in that way, it really is, the word in other cultures is a daemon, like a demon or a genie, a genius, right? It's our genius. It's a gift that's actually given to us. Many creatives will describe basically a channeling, right? That it came through them. And so recognizing that our gifts in that sense are given freely to us, and then we give them freely to other people, pass them on. It's a beautiful cycle. Okay. So actually, let me go back. Wait. Don't look at that yet. Okay. So at this point in the book, after chapter 3, I was like trying to wrap my head around the gift economy and what, like, I've been trying to be in the gift economy, but it's really difficult when we live in a market economy world, right? And he talks about this, and probably further in the book, he'll talk more about it, but that it doesn't have to be an either or, it's often a both and. And we'll see kind of the context in which gift economy works and doesn't work, and why market economy is appropriate in some instances and not in others. But I was trying to wrap my head around, like, what does it look like for me to really thrive within a gift economy? I kind of feel like I am in some ways now. But still have income through Brian's 401k that is market economy, essentially. So, um, I asked my guides, I decided to just kind of empty myself of the parts of me that have fear, scarcity, agenda, trying to figure it out. And I asked my guides for a direct message. And my question was basically, how do I live naturally in the gift economy? Okay, so this is the response that I got from my guides. They said, to enter the gift economy, one needs simply to focus on all one has been given in life and feel one's own genuine gratitude, then allow oneself to naturally be moved by it, which is very in alignment with what that last chapter said about gratitude. But I love the simplicity of, you don't need to figure it out, right? All the figure it out parts that are trying to make this detailed plan, but just to enter the flow that is already there. It's just like entering the river and letting the lazy river take you with it. And the way to enter that river is to simply focus on all that we already have, that we've already been given. So after the guides gave me this, we were at our campsite. I went outside, and on that day it was really hot and the sun was shining, and I sat in my chair um, in the shade of a tree, and I felt so incredibly grateful. Like, I'm going to get emotional right now about it. I felt so grateful for the shade that the tree provided, because in California, the shade works. In Texas, where it's super humid, the shade doesn't work, but it makes a huge difference, right? So I'm sitting in the shade of this tree and I'm just feeling immense gratitude toward the tree. And then it's at some point I got kind of cold and I stepped into the sun, and I thought of the warmth and the energy that the sun provides to me as a free gift. And I felt so much gratitude for it. And then I began watching the birds and the insects and seeing how they're pollinating the flowers and spreading the seeds, and they're singing songs. And it just felt like such a gift to me. Again, it very much reminds me of the ordinary sacred, of just being able to see the miracle everywhere, being able to see the gift everywhere. And I felt so incredibly content in that moment, realizing we have very, very little material possession. We're living in a van. We don't always know where we're going, but we do have our basic needs met. We have food, we have shelter, we have clothing. Um, and I realize more and more how it's kind of an illusion that we need a lot of all those things. We really don't. But and so it just felt so inspiring, and I was sharing with Brian, and then Brian felt inspired, and he decided to give. He was inspired to give certain things, even just to get postcards and send them to each of our children. And it's just you naturally feel moved. It's not anything we have to force ourselves into in any way. It's not a should, it's not a rule. Okay, so I share that with you in case that's helpful to you. Okay, chapter 4 is about the bond. I referred to this already, but Lewis says it is the cardinal difference between gift and commodity exchange is that a gift establishes a feeling bond between people, while the sale of a commodity leaves no necessary connection. So this is kind of when gifts are given, there is a relational feeling bond. When there's a commodity market exchange, there is not. Okay, so we practice gift exchange with those with whom we want to feel close, and commodity with those from whom we want distance. Gifts bespeak relationship. So we'll find out later that, according to Lewis, his estimation is that a gift economy that includes caring for basic needs like food and shelter and water can only work in a community of 1,000 people or less. Because the more and more people you get, you cannot possibly have a feeling bond with that many people. And so there's a certain necessity of distance. He talks about like in a big city, when you're walking around the streets and you don't even acknowledge the presence of people, it seems rude, but it's really because we as humans don't have the capacity to have connection with that many people. Now, we are meant to have connection with a community of people, but we can't, and we can feel connected with everyone, but I'm trying, I think you know what I mean. When, especially in the gift economy, we do begin feeling connected to everyone, but we can't have that personal connection relationship with everyone. So, I know I've learned this even being online, and part of, me even pulling back to YouTube and not doing so many one-on-ones and groups is that it's it's too much energy for me to have a close personal connection with too many people. It feels very divided. I don't have the capacity for that. But I do want to share. He was saying also that in sharing teaching and information and things like that, the community can be much, much wider because there's not this dependence on uh, you know, basic needs like food and water and all of that. So in essence, there is a community and a felt sense of connection. Um, but once it gets too wide, it's the whole gift economy like can't actually function. And he also gives the example of like an adolescent who's leaving the nest and is trying to individuate from their parents. If they keep receiving financial gifts or whatever from the parent, it's harder for them to separate and differentiate. So they begin to have independence and try to make their own money so they can feel differentiated. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So he also made just another quick example that sometimes in therapy and things like that, people say, oh, it should be a gift. But sometimes people actually want that distance. They want the other person to know, both parties want to know we don't have a close relationship. And the payment of the money uh, communicates that to both of them, that there is a certain distance of objectivity. And also why I believe it's illegal, but I'm pretty sure it happens every day but it's illegal for a politician to receive gifts from corporations, right? Because they will inevitably be influenced by that relationship, or doctors to receive gifts from pharmaceutical companies, which I'm pretty sure they do. And it does influence them, right? Um, okay, so a commodity has value through comparison. It's always about comparing the values of one thing or another, whereas a gift has immeasurable worth. He gives this terrible example, this very tragic example in the book of, I believe it's the Pinto company, the car company. And they tried to commoditize the value of a human life and saying, okay, if we make this little change, the gas won't explode the car if it gets hit by it from the back. But they evaluated that it wasn't worth it because they put, I think, can't remember if it was like $20,000 or $50,000 was what they said a human life was worth. And so it wasn't financially justifiable or beneficial to put in the safety thing in each car. And so many, many people died. But a human life cannot be commoditized. It cannot be given a value. It has immeasurable worth. And that's the same thing with a gift, right? Um, when I was going through a really difficult time, um, someone here, Erin, you know who you are. Hi, Erin, is a beautiful, incredibly like I feel like her gift is gift giving. And she's given me so many gifts that are so incredibly meaningful and memorable to me. And one time it was like a stone that was shaped like a heart that had another little heart inside of it that she found walking on the beach. But it was so, it feels immeasurably valuable to me, right? It has so much worth to me that it's one of the things that I have in my van. And I brought almost nothing from my home, into my van. But the things that I brought are things that have immeasurable value because of the human connection and uh, love that was communicated right through it. So, um, okay, so the last quote is when gift exchange achieves a convivial communion of spirits, there is no call for liberty. It is when our attachments become moribund that we long to break them. So basically, again, when gift giving is life giving, no call for liberty just means like people are not trying to separate and leave each other and but when the attachments become life sucking, when it's all about obligation and rules and there's power over and control, that's when people want to break relationship. So gift equals freedom and community. So there's a sense of individuality. It's a both and of individuality. Individual freedom is paramount and community. It really is what I talk about all the time of I'm my own primary caregiver, my own authority. And I give from overflow. I give from this beautiful uh, desire to connect to people, that to flow to the empty spaces. And it's not because I have to, it's because I want to. Okay, we're finally on chapter 5. We're getting to the big question. Okay. So the gift community. Um, Lewis says, in a group that derives its cohesion from a circulation of gifts, the conversion of gifts to commodities will have the effect of fragmenting the group or destroying it. He gives examples of this. But so if you want to see examples of how this happens, you can read the book. He says, rewards of community lose their luster when they are not a matter of choice, right? So when there's an obligation, I have to pay you rent, I have to repay you for this thing. It's interesting. In Ecuador, there is kind of a mix of gift and a beautiful mix actually of it's kind of ideal to Ryan and I. People live very simply. They definitely have a gift mentality. There are fruit trees lining the streets everywhere. The sun, the rivers, nature is free. And If someone needs help and you are able to help them, you help them. And you don't people don't expect anything in return. In fact, when a person tries to pay a person who's given a gift, it is an insult, because the reason is because this person is creating a relational bond with you by giving them the gift. And by paying them, you are breaking that relational bond and saying this is a transaction between non-friends, essentially. So that's why it's offensive to pay for someone who's giving you a gift. But there's all kinds of ways in which people are just giving all the time in that community. So, okay, in gift communities, status, prestige, and esteem take the place of cash. And it's really about relationship, because um, when people feel, and it's not indebted, like obligated, but they feel that the gratitude, the labor of gratitude, what did he say? I can't remember the word he used, but that gratitude then means that the person who has given and given, you will feel naturally a desire to give back to them if and when they have need. He also says ideas do not circulate freely when they are treated as commodities. Um, this reminds me of my last video of how IFS Institute is making the ideas that Dick himself, my self-led bestie David, reminded me recently that Dick said that IFS was given to him by his guides, right? It's kind of like the genius, the genie, the he's given this idea, this gift, and then to commoditize it cheapens it, and then allows it to not be circulated freely. And that's why I wanted all my resources on my website to be free gifts, to be able to be circulated very freely to whoever wants them. Okay. And just a quick note, you can go back to the last video. There's a beautiful comment by Natalie about ACT therapy, and how they have a whole statement about why they don't provide training and certification, and that it is a free thing to circulate amongst everyone. So I loved that. Okay, and then that's where he talks about the gift economy works best in small groups. Okay, so part 2, am I an anarchist? So I'm going to read some of these things, and then I'll give you my thoughts. And this is these are quotes from this chapter that made me go, ooh, am I an anarchist? So he says, gifts are best described as anarchist property, different than the ties that bind through centralized power and top-down authority. Originally, Anabaptists said, nothing should stand between a person and the inner light which informs his actions. No intermediaries, right? No priest or pastor or governor or whatever should stand between a person and their own inner light, their own inner giftings, right? This is definitely something that I have come to really espouse. So I agree with the Anabaptists there. And according to Lewis, the Anabaptists gave birth to forms of anarchism. Okay, but Hobbes, who is really seen as a thinker who espoused the authoritarianism, is what I would call it, but the way that our governments and systems work now is predicated on the natural selfishness of humans, right? The sin nature in religion. It's also predicated on reason and the awe inspired by authority. So the way Hobbes sees it is we're all bad and evil at our core. And so we need to use our brain, our mind, and reason, and then be inspired, aka fear, the repercussions of authority to keep us in line, essentially. So social life, according to Hobbes, emerges only as each man is somehow convinced to inhibit a part of himself. This is how it relates to IFS. So social life is based on restraint, to separate the governed from their governors, and to rely on law, police, courts, jails, etc., to ensure order. Okay, so again, this is what I have reflected on is authoritarian culture that is the air we breathe every single day. And why really IFS is so different from a lot of other modalities because they really do bolster the managers of our system, of our internal family that help us inhibit, restrain, exile certain parts of us, punish and reward. We do that internally, just like it is done externally with our governors and our, um, you know, criminal justice system and all of that. Our teachers, our parents, all of the authorities, priests and pastors. Okay, so the anarchist, according to Lewis, begins with the assumption of man's good nature, contending that law itself is a cause of crime. Now, there are actually many examples of this in the Bible, like Richard Rohr, who calls it a Genesis 1 Christian instead of a Genesis 3 Christian, believing that we are born good, not that we are born in sin. And then there's verses in the New Testament of the Bible about how it's actually the law that is connected to sin that creates something that is breached. And in my experience, as I began to question these things and I began to experiment with the belief that I am good at my core, that I'm lovable at my core, that every other person is, the fruit of it was so good. And then I met nonviolent communication, and that's the premise. Marshall Rosenberg says, I believe that people are actually good at their core. Do they do bad things? Yes, absolutely. Why? They do that when their needs are not met. And so we get curious when anyone acts out or we act out, what's my unmet need? However, when our needs are met, our basic needs, our natural inclination is to give from overflow and to meet the needs of other people. If we cannot bring ourselves to do that, we check what the unmet need in us is and get that met first. So again, that's been my observation, my experience. Okay, I'm going to move this so I can see. One temperament assumes that goodwill underlines social life, that's anarchism, while the other assumes egotism and so must add reason and authority to derive society. And that's Hobbes and authoritarianism. Okay, and then the last quote is, there are many connections between anarchist theory and gift exchange as an economy. Both assume that man is generous, or at least cooperative, in nature. Both shun centralized power. Both are best fitted to small groups and loose federations. Both rely on contracts of the heart over codified contract. But above all, anarchism and gift exchange share the assumption that it is not when a part of the self is inhibited and restrained, but when a part of the self is given away, that community appears. So this whole paragraph here is when I said, wow, am I an anarchist? Because that so resonates with me. All of that, that our general nature is generous or at least cooperative if our needs are met. And the centralized power and authority, power over that some people have over others, and the necessary punishment and shaming that goes along with it is actually what makes a lot of our needs not be met, and then we end up acting out. So it actually becomes the cause in this cycle of crime and acting out. And then this reliance on the contract of the heart, and for someone to be able to give organically from overflow and to get curious when they're not able to do that rather than forcing them to do it through contract or authority. And then not inhibiting and restraining parts of ourselves, but actually allowing all parts to be welcome and giving them away, meaning being completely authentic with who we are with another person allows us to have genuine connection. Okay, so what's the verdict? Am I an anarchist? I talked to Brian a little bit afterward, after I read this, and he was saying, anarchists got a bad rap because the truth is they did often become violent. He said, I think a lot of people call themselves anarchists when they're trying to overthrow the existing authoritarian regime. And they often justify themselves in doing that via violence. So they get the rep that they're violent because they're using violence to overthrow the existing authority. They'll burn money, they'll burn property, so the way that they're going about it, in my estimation, is not necessarily in the spirit of the gift, or at least how Lewis is portraying the heart of anarchism. But I remember not too long ago realizing that I was libertarian and not liking it only because I had this conception that libertarian was like super far right. Now I understand that's not true at all. But I like there's an image of basically there's a T, right? And there's four quadrants. And on the y-axis, it's basically authoritarianism at the top and libertarianism at the bottom, which is non-centralized power over the authority is within each individual and they have freedom to make choices for themselves. And then authoritarian, which is the centralized power over. And then on this axis is left or right, which means like conservative versus liberal. And so what I realized is that both left and right, at least in the US, are up here in the top of their quadrants, right? They're both very authoritarian. And that's why sometimes I'll say, ooh, I don't agree with this and I don't agree with this on either side, because their values are enforced through authoritarian means, right? Of creating punishment or mandate, or everyone has to do this, or we're going to shame them or have some consequence. So what I realize is that I'm more liberal in many ways, conservative in others, but I'm libertarian. I want there to be as little power over as possible to be. And the reason why I am that is because fundamentally I believe that people are good at their core. And that doesn't mean I neglect to see that there's a lot of acting out that happens. But I do believe that that is because people's needs are not being met. And if we can get curious about it and creatively problem solve to get people's needs met, they won't need to act out. And that actually punishing them and this cycle of violence that just continues with the power over, it just feeds it, right? And it's exactly like on the inside, the shame cycle, the addiction cycle on the inside, what fuels it? Shaming and punishment, right? We do something, instead of there being curiosity around why it makes sense, we have a part that shames it and says, you terrible, awful thing. I can't believe you're doing that. You should be punished. You should die, whatever. And that shame, the pain of it, then feeds the parts that want to numb out or act out. And the cycle continues and continues, right? So it happens on the inside. I've observed it on the inside. I've observed it on the outside. And I really do think it is. I love that. I keep saying Lewis. I'm forgetting his last name. Lewis Hyde. I do like that he says there is a place for both and, right? And it's about us figuring out which people do we want to be in a commodity relationship with, and which people do we want to be in a gift economy with, and what does that look like? And again, it begins with just focusing on the gifts we're already given, having the eyes to see them, and allowing the gratitude to move us in whatever way feels natural to us, and watching the good impulse, right? Because essentially the gratitude is recognizing, oh my gosh, my needs are met. And then when we realize that, we naturally want to give from overflow to other people. Or we might realize our needs are not met. That's why we're feeling so angsty and irritable and in despair and down. And we can say, ooh, my needs are not met. Who do I have relationship with that I trust that I can ask to help meet my needs? Or what are creative ways to get my needs met so that I can then give from overflow? Okay. So I'm not a violent anarchist. I don't believe in using violence to promote the gift economy. Um, but I do very much resonate with the way it was presented in the Gift by Lewis Hyde. So tell me in the comments what you think. Do you think I'm an anarchist? Do you think you're an anarchist? Uh, what what do you think about what I shared about the gift economy? And hopefully I'll make another video as I progress through the book. But there was just so much to share already. So thanks so much for listening. And if you have listened to the end, go ahead and put an emoji of a gift or gratitude or community, something like that. Anarchy. Um, and I will see you next time. May you be kind to yourselves and all your parts until we meet again.